Okay, I have a lull at work, so I thought I would pick up Seneca again. And I'm on letter 9, still not very far into it. Um, but there's a paragraph in here that caught my attention. The main point that he's talking about is actually friendship. But in the process, he makes an illustration, and it's the illustration that really caught my attention. It's not the main point that he's making, but it's still just really interesting. He talks about how he's talking about making friends and keeping friends, basically. Um, Keeping up old and established friendship, but also beginning and building up a new one. But the illustration that he uses is so he has a quote from another philosopher named Attalus that says, "In the same way as an artist derives more pleasure from painting than from having completed a picture, more pleasure from the process of the painting than satisfaction from the completion of it." Now, you may or may not agree with that, but that's the the illustration continues, and Seneca expounds on that. So that was the quote from Attalus. Now Seneca, he says, when his whole attention is absorbed in concentration on the work he is engaged on, a tremendous sense of satisfaction is created in him by his very absorption. And that caught my attention. He actually ends it with that paragraph with uh, so with our children, their growing up brings wider fruits, but their infancy was sweeter. And the reason why that caught my attention, especially like the part about being uh, a tremendous sense of satisfaction is created in him by his very absorption. Being absorbed in the work is satisfactory, and this caught my attention for a few reasons. Well, no, not a few. One reason that has a lot of background to it, I guess you might say, and I will try to keep this brief. But so I'm a software developer. I um, and I have noticed and I'm a software developer. I became a software developer because I liked math. I liked math because I liked problem solving, and I probably developed that. I enjoy problem solving from video games, so I think I did. I don't know. I know for sure, but I liked the problem solving in math. I liked the process of resolving, of getting from point A to point B, of the logical reasoning, and I found that logical reasoning is very much exists in software development. So that's why I liked it. And it was the process that I really enjoyed. And I find that whenever I have a project where I enjoy the process, as opposed to I just have an end goal that I want to get to. And if I'm focused on the end goal and I really am not enjoying the process, then I'm not going to do very well. That's just kind of the way it is. And there's a word for that, there's a term for that. It's called, and I learned it, this is called the law of reversed effort. And this is from Chat GPT because I've stopped using search engines because they're just awful. So that's one thing I like about AI. Um, so this is a quote from ChatGPT. This idea is rooted in the notion that when you focus too intensely on the end goal, you can become overwhelmed or anxious, which can hinder your performance. However, when you focus on the immediate task at hand, you are more likely to enter a state of flow where you are fully immersed and engaged in the activity, leading to better outcomes. In psychological terms, this can be related to the idea of process orientation versus goal orientation. And I think that's really interesting, and I think that's something that's kind of it's good to know because there can be a way to make this more If you're focused strictly on the end goal, sometimes there's time for that, depending on what you're doing. But sometimes it can be overwhelming and you just end up burning out real quickly. Uh, but when you try to focus on the process, that can make a pretty big difference. I feel like I could go on for a long time about that, but just looking up the law of reversed effort is in itself is probably worth it. Um, but anyway, I just thought that was really interesting. That and I'll repeat that one sentence that really caught my attention again. When his whole attention is absorbed in concentration on the work he is engaged on, a tremendous sense of satisfaction is created in him by his very absorption. So when you're really, I guess, passionate about something, then the process itself is enjoyable. And you can kind of even think about like in a video game, like a good example would be the Portal games. I think there's only two. I don't think there's a third one out, but I haven't really been following that in a long time. Um, but there's definitely a satisfaction in the end whenever you resolve the puzzle. But there's also an immense amount of satisfaction in the process of solving it. That's why I like math personally. I know that's a very unpopular opinion, but that's also why I like software development. Although software development is tricky, a lot of times you can't avoid being the goal oriented, a lot of times because that's the nature of the beast. That's a kind of a separate goal, a separate discussion. But um, the whenever you're in a place where the process, if you focus on the process, you get further, a lot further. It's kind of an interesting thing.